At the family party, my son kissed his wife while they were dancing. She pulled away and said, "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you." Everyone started to laugh. Then she added, "You don't even meet my standards. Get away from me." The laughter grew louder. My son tensed up and began to convulse, until my grandson suddenly spoke, and the entire room fell silent. But before I continue, check if you've already subscribed to the channel and share in the comments where you are watching us from. We'd love to know how far our stories of revenge travel. I was standing in a corner of the kitchen, a small paring knife in my hand, carefully arranging each slice of orange on the fruit platter, trying to make it look as beautiful as possible. Today was the birthday of Camilla, my daughter-in-law, and the whole family was busy with preparations. Robert, my son, was in the backyard, sweat running down his forehead as he tried to hang the last string of lights over the rose arbor. Robert had planned this party all by himself. He ordered a 3-tier cake from the city's most famous bakery and hired a live band. On the table, a bouquet of deep red premium roses rested neatly, the kind of expensive flowers Robert usually gave his wife on every anniversary. The guests began to arrive, most of them Camilla's friends. They were elegantly dressed, in sparkling sequined dresses and heels that echoed on the tiled floor. They laughed, talked loudly, passing Robert as if he were a stranger, barely nodding out of obligation. Then Camilla appeared, radiating like a movie star, in an emerald green silk dress that Robert had bought on credit the week before. I still remember how he told me with pride how much Camilla had liked that dress when she saw it in the store. Her hair fell in soft waves, her lips were a deep red, and the whole room seemed to light up with her presence. Robert, flustered, took the bouquet of premium roses and presented them to her with a look full of love. But Camilla only smiled coldly, a smile without warmth, and placed the bouquet on a corner table as if it were worthless. She turned to embrace her friends, letting out a burst of laughter that echoed loudly, leaving Robert alone. Throughout the party, Camilla stayed among her friends, laughing, chatting, paying no attention to her husband. Suddenly, the band switched to a soft waltz, the song they had danced to at their wedding. I saw Robert take a deep breath, as if gathering courage, and approach her. "Dance with me, my love," he said in a soft voice, though I noticed the tremor in his words. Camilla rolled her eyes, a gesture full of annoyance, but at the glances of her friends, she agreed and placed her hand on her husband's shoulder. I watched my son as he danced, every step measured, concentrated. He leaned toward Camilla's ear and whispered something, perhaps a phrase of love, an apology, or a promise. I didn't hear it, but I saw how his eyes shone with hope, like a child waiting for a gentle touch. As the music was about to end, Robert inclined his head tenderly, trying to kiss his wife, as he used to in the old days. But like a knife thrust, Camilla snapped her head back to dodge him. She let out a cold, sharp laugh that resonated over the fading music. "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you," she said in a clear voice, without hesitation. "You don't even meet my standards. Get away from me." Those words were like a direct stab to the heart, and I knew that for Robert, they hurt 1,000 times more. She bent down, picked up the hairless terrier puppy that was weaving between her feet, and gave it a kiss on the muzzle, as if it were a game. Her friends burst into laughter. Some even took out their phones, as if they had just witnessed an amusing show. Robert stood paralyzed, his face white as a sheet. The crystal glass he was holding fell to the floor and shattered. The sound of breaking glass filled the sudden silence. I saw his eyes roll back. His body began to tremble, and he collapsed to the floor, convulsing strongly. I knew immediately that it was an epileptic seizure, the illness that had been with him since birth. My scream pierced the air. I ran toward him, knelt by his side, held his head so he wouldn't hurt himself. "Robert, my son!" I yelled, tears streaming, caring about nothing else. All I saw was my son, lying there in the midst of the chaos. The crowd remained silent and then panicked. They backed away. No one dared to help. Those elegant faces, those perfect smiles, now only showed fear and indifference. I hugged my son tightly, screaming for help, but no one responded. Amidst the screams, I heard a sob in a corner. It was little Davy, my grandson, his eyes full of tears, pointing at Camilla and shouting, "Mummy is mean! Mummy doesn't love Daddy. She only likes kissing Uncle Rod." I saw her kiss him outside when it was already dark. The child's words exploded like a bomb. The laughter and murmurs instantly ceased. All eyes turned to Camilla. I turned toward her and saw her face pale, her lips pressed tight, but her eyes remained cold, without a trace of remorse. From far away, the ambulance siren was heard, breaking the suffocating silence. The paramedics ran in, placed Robert on a stretcher. I got up quickly, ran after them, but before leaving, I turned my head one last time. Camilla was still there, motionless, slowly retreating into the shadow of the corner, her face impassive. I sat on the metal bench in the hospital hallway, the cold of the metal seeping through me. From my son's room, the constant beeping of the machines could be heard. Through the window, I saw him lying on the bed, his face pale and his eyes closed. Sitting in the suffocating silence of the hospital, memories of past days rushed back, like an old movie being rewound. I, Martha Miller, am now 65 years old, my hair already grey and my back bent from years of work and effort. But this story, the one that brought me here, began when I was just 25, when everything in my life was still full of energy and hope. I still clearly remember that small, suffocating doctor's office with the chipped white walls. The doctor, an elderly man with thick glasses and a compassionate gaze, sat across from me and David, my husband at the time. He cleared his throat and spoke in a grave voice, as if he didn't want to cause more pain. "The child, Robert, has congenital epilepsy. He must be watched closely and will likely need lifelong medication." I felt the world collapsing. My little son, who was barely 1 month old and sleeping in my arms, so fragile and tiny, was burdened with a disease I barely understood. David was next to me, silent, his face shadowed. On the way home, David didn't say a single word. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his lips tense, as if restraining a storm. Upon arriving, he threw his briefcase onto the table with such force that I jumped. "You're useless. You don't even know how to give birth properly," he roared with contempt. "Are there crazy people in your family or something? That child will be my embarrassment." Every word was like a direct stab to the heart. I stood there, hugging Robert, as tears fell uncontrollably. From that day on, David changed. He started coming home late, permeated with the smell of cheap women's perfume, a scent I had never worn. I knew very well where he was seeking solace, but I didn't have the strength to confront him. 1 month later, he packed his things. He threw a wad of crumpled bills at me and said, "I can't live with a woman who couldn't give me a healthy son. I'm leaving to find my happiness." I watched him walk out the door without looking back. I knew his happiness had a name. The young secretary in his office, the one he had had dinner with right in front of me, as if I no longer existed. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in that empty house, hugging my sick son, unable to stop the tears. The years that followed were an endless chain of effort. I worked in 2 places at once, by day as an office worker in a small company, and by night doing accounting from home. Many nights I stayed under the dim light of a lamp, reviewing numbers while Robert slept in his crib. But on other nights, when the seizures attacked him, I stayed awake all night, holding him in my arms until his body relaxed. The looks of pity from the neighbors, the whispers behind my back, no longer hurt me. Poor Mrs. Miller, raising a sick child alone, they would say. But no one offered help. I didn't blame them. I knew that in this life, only it could be my son's support. Robert grew up, and I felt proud of him. Despite his illness, he was a responsible and studious child, always at the top of his class, as if he wanted to compensate for my sleepless nights. Every time he came home with his report card and smiled, my heart filled with warmth. "Mum, I did it," he would say proudly. I would hug him and cry in silence. I knew that my son was not only fighting against his illness, but also against the world's prejudices. When Robert graduated from college, I cried with joy all night. Then he founded a small travel agency with big dreams of showcasing the beauty of America. I saw him grow into a respectable man, and I thought that all my sacrifice had been worth it. Then he met Camilla during a business trip. She was a flight attendant, young, beautiful, with a smile that lit up everything. Robert fell madly in love, and although in my heart I felt a stirring of uneasiness, a dark premonition, I accepted their wedding. I just wanted to see him happy, to give him a family that I could never offer him. After they got married, they moved in with me. 1 year later, little Davy was born, and I was the one who chose his name. Those were the happiest days of my life. In the mornings, Robert went to work, Camilla did the household chores, and I walked Davy around the neighborhood, telling him stories about our home state. His smile filled the house, healing the old wounds in my soul. I believed that life was finally compensating us. But then the COVID pandemic arrived, sweeping everything away. Tourism stopped, and Robert's company went bankrupt in a few months. The weight of debt fell on his shoulders. I saw Camilla's smile fade, replaced by sighs, complaints, and laments about money, expensive purses, and the trips she could no longer take. "Look around you. Everyone else is still living, and I'm trapped in this house," she yelled one night during dinner, while Robert lowered his head in silence. But my son didn't give up. He turned that small room into his office, sitting in front of the computer from dawn until late at night, doing any job possible to earn money. From managing a bakery's social media page, designing advertising flyers for a furniture store, to writing product descriptions for online shops, he did it all. I watched him type, his fingers moving fast on the keyboard, and I knew he was trying to save this family, to rescue the remnants of what was once happiness. Every night, when the house was already quiet, I prepared a cup of black coffee, without sugar, just the way Robert liked it. I gently pushed the door open, left the cup on the corner of the table, and said, "Rest a little. It's very late." My voice was low, fearing to interrupt his concentration, but Robert would only look up and give me a tired smile, his eyes red from lack of sleep, his back hunched from the hours spent sitting. "I'm fine, Mum. I'm just finishing this, and then I'll rest," he would reply. But I knew that resting for him was barely a few minutes of sleep before returning to work. The money was never enough. The bills for electricity, water, groceries, Robert's medication, everything piled up like stones on his shoulders. I began to slowly sell the jewelry from my hope chest, the pieces my mother had left me, bracelets, earrings, necklaces that I had guarded so carefully for years. Every time I took a piece to the pawn shop, I felt my heart break, but I had no other option. "They are just material things," I kept telling myself, although deep down I knew I was losing the last memories of my mother, the days when I was still young and full of dreams. Camilla changed. She was no longer the sweet woman who affectionately prepared every meal. Every time she sat at the table, she sighed with annoyance and looked at the dishes as if they were unworthy. "The meat isn't fresh, and these vegetables aren't even organic," she would say in an irritated voice, as if we wanted to make her life impossible. I swallowed, trying to remain calm, although inside I was deeply hurt. I remembered when she first married Robert. She would laugh, chat, carefully pick out carrots at the supermarket to cook for her husband. Now she only looked at her phone and showed Robert photos of her friends at luxury resorts. "Look, Tom's wife is in Maui again, and I'm trapped in this hole," she said bitterly. Robert only lowered his head, ate his cold rice, and clenched his fist under the table, holding back the pain. The house started to become messy, dirty dishes piled up in the sink, dirty laundry accumulated behind the doors. Camilla no longer did anything around the house. She went out more and more often, with excuses I knew were false. "I'm going for coffee with friends to de-stress," or "It's a co-worker's birthday." She came back very late, sometimes past 1 minute after midnight, smelling of alcohol and an expensive perfume that I knew Robert couldn't afford. From the dark hallway, I watched her stagger in, heels in hand, and wondered who this woman was. Was she the Camilla that Robert had loved so much, or just a shadow of what she was? One rainy afternoon, the sky turned dark grey, as if it wanted to swallow everything. It was almost 7 in the evening, and Davy hadn't arrived. That day, according to the schedule, Camilla was supposed to pick him up from school. I called her again and again, but she didn't answer. Anguish overcame me. I grabbed my old raincoat and ran out into the downpour. When I arrived, I saw Davy's small silhouette huddled under the guard's roof, clutching his backpack, his eyes red with fear. When he saw me, he burst into tears and ran toward me. "Grandma, Mommy forgot to pick me up. Everyone left. I was so scared." His voice trembled, as if the whole world had abandoned him. I hugged him tightly, tears mixing with the rain on my face. The teacher approached, distressed. "I've called Mrs. Camilla several times, but she doesn't answer." Luckily, the guard stayed with the child. That night, I stayed next to Davy until he fell asleep, but my chest felt tight. Close to 1 minute after midnight, Camilla returned, her hair messy, her lips stained red. Robert got up, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and worry. "Where were you? It was your turn to pick up Davy today. Do you know he was alone at school?" Camilla screamed, her voice sharp as a knife. "I was with an important client, the one time I go out, and you make a drama out of it. Do you think I want to live this miserable life?" I listened from behind the door, my heart shattered. Not because of the words, but because of seeing Robert's eyes. The eyes of a man still trying to hold together something that had broken long ago. The fights became daily. Sometimes I woke up startled by the sound of things breaking. I heard Camilla's voice, sharp, yelling, "I'm sick of this. Look at you, you're useless. I want a divorce." I would sit in bed, my hand on my chest, holding my breath, helplessly listening to my son endure it in silence. The next day, the atmosphere in the house was tense, like a rope about to snap. Robert spent the whole day looking down, not saying a word. I saw him sitting in his room, his gaze sad but focused on his work. At night he arrived with an elegant box, inside which was a beige designer purse, the same one Camilla had always wanted. I knew he had had to borrow money from his friends and even sell his favorite old watch to buy that gift. When Camilla saw the purse, her eyes lit up. She hugged Robert and smiled radiantly. "Thank you, my love. I knew you still love me the most." She took photos of the purse and uploaded them to social media, as if the cruel words of the night before had never existed. But I, from the corner of the living room, watched with a cold heart. I saw her smile, but I knew it wasn't love. It was just momentary satisfaction, like that of a child being given candy. Camilla's false smile, when she hugged that luxury purse that Robert had bought with his sweat and dignity, faded from my mind to give way to the harsh reality. For an entire week that Robert was in the hospital, Camilla did not appear once, not a call, not a message. She disappeared completely, as if she had never been a part of this family. I tried to contact her friends, those same ones who were laughing so loudly at the birthday party, but they answered evasively, with an indifferent tone. "I don't know, ma'am. Ask someone else." Their words hurt me like knives. Those whom Camilla called her best friends now didn't care about her or her husband, who was still laid up in the hospital. I wondered where she was, what she was doing, while her husband had just narrowly escaped death, and our world was crumbling. Every day, I rushed back and forth between the hospital and the house, taking care of Robert and looking after Davy. The little one, with his big, innocent eyes, asked me every night, "Grandma, where is Mommy? When is she coming back?" I could only lie to him, my voice choked. "Your mummy is travelling for work. She'll be back in a few days." But every time I looked at him, I saw a silent fear in his eyes, as if he also sensed the truth I was trying to hide. I hugged him tight and sang him to sleep, while inside me sadness and rage grew. I didn't understand how Camilla could abandon her own son, how she could leave a whole family behind, as if we were worthless. The day Robert was discharged, I helped him return home with a heavy heart. He was pale, thin, still weak, with sunken eyes after so many days in bed. I just wanted him to rest, to find some peace in his own home. But we had barely crossed the threshold, without even having time to sit down, when there were sharp, urgent knocks at the door. I opened it and saw a middle-aged man, impeccably dressed in a grey suit, with a serious expression. He introduced himself as the house buyer, in a firm voice. "I've come to finalize the transaction. Mrs. Camilla told me that today her husband would hand over the original documents to transfer the property of the house and the pickup truck." I froze, as if I had been slapped. Robert, behind me, leaned on the doorframe, his voice trembling. "What are you saying? I never agreed to sell the house or the car." The man frowned, annoyed, as if he thought we were trying to trick him. He opened his briefcase, took out a sales contract and a power of attorney, and placed them in front of us. "Here is your signature. Don't you see it? Your wife said you were sick, and that's why the handwriting doesn't look very good." Robert took the document, his hand trembling. I leaned in to look, and felt my heart stop. In the seller section there was a shaky, clumsy signature, like that of a frail old man, completely different from my son's firm, confident handwriting. I looked at Robert. His face was pale, his eyes wide open, filled with horror. "That's not my signature," he exclaimed, his voice broken, as if he had been betrayed again. I took his hand to calm him, but inside me, a flame of fury began to burn. What had Camilla done? We tried to call her, but her phone was out of service. The man at first didn't believe us, his voice sounding harsh. "Are you messing with me? I already paid the deposit. The contract is signed." But when Robert took out his ID and signed several times in front of him, the man was speechless. His expression changed from anger to bewilderment, and he mumbled, "If this isn't your signature, then I was scammed." He said he would call the police, but I knew that if the matter became public, our family would be caught up in a legal mess, and the house, the home full of memories of my life with Robert, would cease to be ours. I couldn't allow it. I wasn't going to let Davy lose the only roof he had ever known. I took a deep breath, contained the pain, and told the man, "Leave it to me. I will refund your deposit money and pay the penalty." He looked at me suspiciously, but finally accepted. That very day, I went to the bank and withdrew all my savings, the money I had kept for years for my old age, so as not to be a burden to my children and grandchildren. But now I had no other option. I signed the withdrawal with a trembling hand, feeling that something inside me was breaking. I wasn't just losing money, I was also losing the security I had built with so much effort. That night, after Davy fell asleep, I sat with Robert in the living room, wrapped in a heavy silence. The weak yellow light illuminated his face, and he seemed to have aged 10 years. He leaned on my shoulder and cried like a child. "Mom, what did I do wrong? Why did she do this to me?" His voice trembled. Every word tore at my soul. I comforted him, but inside me, the sadness had already transformed into steely determination. This was no longer a simple marital conflict. It was a cruel conspiracy, and I, as a mother, was not going to let it continue. I got up, went into my room, and opened the drawer where I kept an old contact notebook, yellowed with time. The fragile, ink-stained pages held names from an era when I was still young and full of energy. I flipped through the pages with my heart pounding until I found the name Lucy Walker, a former co-worker who now had a private detective agency. I remembered Lucy, a strong, shrewd woman who had helped me get through the toughest days after David left. I dialed her number without hesitation, and when I heard her grave voice on the other end of the line, I knew I had found the right person. "Lucy, I need your help," I said with a serene but determined voice. "I need to know the truth about my daughter-in-law." 3 days after that call, Lucy met me at a small, discreet coffee shop, hidden in a quiet alley downtown. She placed a thick envelope in front of me and said in a low, firm voice, "It wasn't hard to find her, Martha. She doesn't even bother to hide." I looked into her eyes and saw a flash of compassion. I knew that what that envelope contained wouldn't be easy to face. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a stack of photos, clear, revealing every detail. Camilla, my daughter-in-law, appeared in them, smiling, walking hand in hand with a young man. They were entering and leaving a luxurious building in a new, rich area of the city, where the glass towers shone like mirrors. Camilla wore expensive clothes, her hair carefully curled, her smile radiant, as if she had never known the difficult days with Robert. The man next to her was well dressed, his hair slicked back with gel, expensive sunglasses, with an air of arrogance and overconfidence. Lucy pointed to the man in the photo and said coldly, "Rod Montrose, 28 years old. He claims to own the Blue Terrace restaurant chain, but his real story is quite interesting." The name, Rod, echoed in my head like thunder. It was the same name Davy had shouted during the birthday party, crying and pointing at his mother. I felt the blood rush to my head, my heart pounding hard in my chest. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fit together, but each one hurt more than the last. Camilla had not only betrayed Robert, but was living another life, shamelessly, as if our family had never existed. I squeezed the photos so hard that my nails dug into my palm. I couldn't stand still. I had to confront her, not for my son, but for justice, to protect what was left of our family. I took a taxi to the address Lucy had given me. The luxury building appeared before me, with shining glass walls and perfectly trimmed trees. At the entrance, a uniformed guard watched me suspiciously. I took a deep breath and, in a calm voice, told him, "I'm a relative visiting my niece from out of state. Please let me in." The guard looked me up and down, hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded and opened the door. I walked in with the feeling of crossing into a world where I didn't belong. In front of the door of apartment 12B, my heart was pounding hard, about to burst from my chest. I inhaled deeply to calm myself and rang the doorbell. The dry sound of the bell resonated like a warning. The door opened, and there was Camilla, splendid in red silk pajamas, as bright as her defiance. In her hand, she held a glass of red wine. Her eyes scanned me with a mixture of surprise and nonchalance. She leaned against the doorframe, smiling mockingly. "Oh, the dear mother-in-law, what brings you here?" Her voice was sweet, but sharp as a silk-covered blade. I didn't beat around the bush. I looked her straight in the eye. My voice trembled with anger, but I stayed calm. "Why did you do that to Robert? Why did you forge his signature to sell the house?" Camilla let out a burst of laughter, a laugh full of contempt, as if my question were absurd. She took a sip of wine and replied with provocative calmness, "Yes, I did. So what?" Then she added with an insolent smile, "I'm sick of living in misery with your useless son. I deserve something better, do you understand? That life, that old house isn't what I want." Her words were like a knife plunged into my heart. Camilla turned toward the inside of the house, pulled out a file, and threw it at me. The papers fell scattered across the hallway, as if they were the broken pieces of our family. "It's the divorce petition," she said, her voice cold. "Make your spoiled son sign it. I don't want anything from that broken house, just to be left alone." Camilla's brazen attitude, her disdainful smile, and her knife-sharp words made my blood boil. I couldn't restrain myself anymore. I took a step forward, raised my hand, ready to slap her to wake her up, to make her understand that she couldn't trample on my family like this. But Camilla was faster. She screamed and retreated further inside the house. Her strident voice echoed through the luxury apartment. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, her gaze both terrified and defiant. The commotion made a man rush out of the bedroom. He was only wearing a towel tightly wrapped around his waist, which exposed a large tattoo on his chest, an eagle with outstretched wings, as arrogant as he was. I recognized him immediately. It was Rod, the man from Lucy's photos. He looked at me. The surprise on his face turned into anger. He approached, grabbed my arm, and pushed me hard. I nearly lost my balance and fell. "You crazy old lady! What the heck are you doing in my house?" he shouted, his voice violent, as if I were an uninvited intruder. I hadn't had time to respond when the noise caused more people to come out. A middle-aged couple, looking sleepy and annoyed, appeared from another room. The man stopped. He looked at me, and time seemed to stand still. His hair was already white, his face etched with wrinkles, but those cold eyes I would never forget. It was David, my ex-husband, the one who abandoned Robert and me more than 40 years ago. I felt my chest tighten, not from pain, but from a horror at seeing the past suddenly reappear, alive and cruel. David looked at me. He was stunned for an instant, and then a mocking smile slowly spread across his face. "Well, well, look who we have here. Martha, the world really is a small town," he said, with the same disdainful tone as when he left, leaving me with a sick son. I looked from David to Rod, and then to the woman next to him, his wife, elegantly dressed, her face cold as a statue. Everything suddenly became clear, but it was a cruel truth that pierced my chest like a dagger. Rod, the man standing in front of me, was David's son with his subsequent wife. Camilla, my daughter-in-law, had been cheating with her husband's half-brother, though only on paper. I stood there, my feet nailed to the floor, feeling my entire world collapse around me. David approached, his voice as sharp as ever. You're still as pathetic as before, Martha. At this age, are you still going around sticking your nose into matters that don't concern you because of that sick son? His words were like a slap, but I was no longer the weak woman who cried in silence when he left. I stared him in the eyes, without an ounce of fear, although an intense rage burned inside me. Rod wrapped his arm around Camilla's waist, laughed, and followed his father's words. You know this old lady. What a coincidence. And you should know something. I own a big restaurant now. I can give Camilla a life your son could never dream of. He spoke with smug satisfaction, as if boasting about an achievement. Camilla stood by his side with a proud smirk, her gaze haughty, as if she had won a game in which Robert and I were merely worthless pawns. The woman next to David, his new wife, crossed her arms over her chest and cut in with a cold voice. If you don't leave here right now, I'll call security to have you forcibly removed. Don't dirty our house. Her words were the final straw. I found myself alone in the nest of those who had trampled and continued to trample on my life and my son's. Rage overwhelmed me until I trembled, but I couldn't say anything. Not out of fear, but because I knew that words wouldn't change anything. I looked at each of them. At David with his sarcastic smile, at Rod with his air of sufficiency, at Camilla with her brazenness, and at the wife with her contempt, and I etched every face into my memory like a vow that I would never forget. I bent down to pick up the divorce papers scattered on the floor. Each sheet was another wound marked on my heart. I turned and left, with Camilla's giggles and whispers behind me, without looking back. Tears of humiliation welled up, but I quickly brushed them away. I wasn't going to show them my weakness. Leaving the building, I stood under the yellowish light of the lamppost. The night wind chilled me to the bone. I hugged the file against my chest, feeling like the whole world was against me. But inside me, the pain turned into a flame of hatred that burned intensely. I swore to myself that I would make them all pay, not with violence, but with justice, with the truth that I was going to uncover. The following morning, when the first rays of sun filtered through the curtains, I didn't allow myself to cry or complain. I stood in front of the mirror and dressed in the most formal clothes I had, a simple but neat black dress, the same one I had worn on important occasions, like the day Robert graduated from college. I went straight to the lawyer's office that Lucy had recommended to me. The office was on a quiet street, with shade trees on both sides. I pushed the door open and walked in. The smell of old wood and paper made me feel like I was entering a new battlefield. Mrs. Carter, the lawyer Lucy had introduced me to, was a middle-aged woman with her hair pulled back in a high bun and a sharp yet warm gaze. I placed the stack of documents on the table. Each sheet was a piece of the puzzle of betrayal: the forged contract with a clumsy signature, the house buyer's statement about the illegal transaction, Lucy's detailed report with the photos of Camilla and Rod, and the divorce petition she had thrown in my face. Mrs. Carter reviewed each document carefully, turning the pages slowly, without taking her eyes off the lines. Finally, she looked up and gazed at me with empathy, but also with firmness. Mrs. Miller, we have enough evidence to sue her on 2 charges: fraud and forgery of documents. It is a criminal offence. I will do everything necessary to ensure that justice is served. Mrs. Carter's words were like a ray of light that cut through the fog inside me. For the first time in days, I felt a little hope. I nodded, my voice hoarse. Thank you, Isabel. I want nothing more than to protect my son and my grandson. She took my hand and squeezed it softly, like a promise. As I left the office, my shoulders felt a little lighter, although a storm was still raging inside me. That night I sat down to talk with Robert in our small living room. He was on the couch, looking thoughtfully out the window, where the streetlights cast dull reflections. The room was silent. Only the ticking of the clock could be heard. I took a deep breath and began to tell him the whole truth, what I had discovered, what I had faced. "Robert, I need you to know the truth," I said, my voice trembling. "Camilla not only betrayed you, she forged your signature to sell the house and the car. She's living with Rod, and worst of all is that Rod is David's son, your father." Robert did not scream or get angry. He just stayed still, his gaze empty, as tears streamed down his drawn cheeks. His silence was more terrifying than any outburst of anger. After a long time, he raised his head and spoke in a whisper full of pain. "I thought she was just tired of being poor. I never imagined she could do something like that. And David? Why did he come back? To hurt me again?" His words were like a knife piercing my heart. I had tried to protect him from the past, from the man who abandoned us, but that past had returned, more cruel than ever. I placed Camilla's divorce petition and the custody documents that Mrs. Carter had prepared on the table. "Son, it's time to end this," I told him with a firm voice. "Not just for you, but for Davy. We can't let her keep hurting this family." Robert looked me in the eyes. There was no longer emptiness in his gaze, but a spark of determination. He took the pen and signed both documents with a firm stroke, without hesitating. I watched him, and for the first time in days, I saw in him something of the strength of the man I had raised. A few days after submitting the lawsuit and the divorce papers to the court, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered, and Camilla's voice exploded on the other end, full of fury. "You wretched old woman! What did you do? Why can't I withdraw the money from the sale? Since when did you get the house back?" Then I understood. Due to the legal proceedings, the bank had blocked the transaction. Camilla still believed she had sold the house and would soon receive the money. I smiled, not with joy, but with a strange calm. "Since you were busy sleeping next to another man and dreaming of money that was never yours," I answered, my voice serene. The other side fell silent. Only her agitated breathing could be heard, as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown on her. I didn't wait for her response. I hung up and blocked the number. During the days we waited for the court to accept the case, I tried to maintain the routine. Every morning I got up early and prepared a simple breakfast of toast and fried eggs, Davy's favourite. The child sat in his chair, swinging his legs, while talking about school, his eyes full of light. Robert also strove to move forward. I saw him slowly regain his spirits. At night, he played with Davy, taught him to read, or told him stories about the trips he had once dreamed of taking with his family. Robert also returned to work. He diligently focused on researching a new business project about local experience tourism, an idea he had dreamed of for a long time, even when his old company collapsed. I saw him sitting in his room, in front of the computer, typing and drawing diagrams, his eyes shining every time he talked about the small towns, the colourful farmers' markets, or the cultural stories he wanted to share with visitors. "Mum, I think this project can work," he told me one night in an enthusiastic voice. "I want to start over, not just for me, but for Davy." I nodded, patted his shoulder, and felt my heart swell with pride. One weekend afternoon, when the sunset stained the neighbourhood gold, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Mr. Stephen Thompson, an old friend and business partner whom Robert respected greatly. He carried a basket of fruit and had a kind smile on his face. "I had to pass through this area to check on my restaurant," he said cordially. "I remembered Robert told me you lived nearby, so I wanted to say hello. It's been a long time. How are you?" Robert immediately got up, his face illuminated by surprise and joy. "Uncle Stephen, I didn't imagine you'd come to visit us." He invited him in, and soon the two were chatting animatedly about work and future plans, as if time had never interrupted their friendship. I quietly prepared tea and placed the tray on the table, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy. Seeing Robert laugh and talk, I recognized in him a part of that man full of passion and dreams that he used to be. Mr. Thompson spoke about his restaurant, about the difficulties in the sector, but also with pride when mentioning the traditional dishes he had preserved. As he was about to leave, he pulled a business card from his pocket and gave it to Robert. "Here is my number," he said sincerely. "When you have your project ready, call me. My restaurant, the Blue Terrace, is always willing to collaborate with quality tours. I think you can achieve something special." Upon hearing the name, the Blue Terrace, I froze, as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over me. My hands trembled, and I dropped the cup onto the table. The sound of breaking glass startled Robert and Mr. Thompson. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice somewhat shaky. "Did you say that restaurant is yours?" Mr. Thompson nodded, with a slight expression of surprise, but still with pride. "That's right, it's my life's work. Is something wrong, Mrs. Miller?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm, and dared to ask, "So, do you know someone named Rod Montrose? He said he was the owner of that restaurant." Mr. Thompson let out a big laugh, a relaxed but surprised laugh. "Rod? Ah, the night shift manager. That boy is talkative, yes, but he's barely a supervisor. He has no right to say he's the owner. Why? Is he showing off to people about that?" He looked at Robert and me, trying to understand why we were talking about such an insignificant employee. In that instant, all the pieces clicked into place in my head, like a puzzle finally completed. Rod, the man who was pretending to be the restaurant owner to deceive Camilla, turned out to be just an imposter, a simple manager who used the prestige of the Blue Terrace to hide his mediocrity. I felt a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at Rod's lies that had destroyed our family, and relief because the truth was finally coming to light. I couldn't keep silent anymore. I looked at Mr. Thompson, my voice trembling but firm. "Mr. Thompson, I need to tell you something. It's about Rod, about Camilla, and also about David, his father." I told him the whole story, how Camilla had betrayed Robert, forged his signature to sell the house, and how I confronted her and Rod in that luxurious apartment. I told him about David, the ex-husband who had abandoned my son and me, and the awful discovery that Rod was his son. Robert remained by my side, his head down and his hands clenched, trying to contain his emotions. Mr. Thompson listened intently. His expression became increasingly serious. When I finished, he forcefully hit the table, outraged. "Unbelievable! I cannot allow someone with such rotten morals to continue working with me." He used my name for his misdeeds. He turned to Robert, his eyes full of determination. "Don't worry. I'll take care of this. Justice must be done." The day of the trial dawned grey, as somber as my mood. Robert, the lawyer Mrs. Carter and I arrived at the courthouse early, when the streets were still covered in fog and the cold seeped through my coat. Robert wore an impeccable black suit, his hair neatly combed. He looked more serene and stronger than ever. We sat in the first row of the courtroom, where the light filtering through the tall windows made the dust motes suspended in the air shine. A moment later, they brought in Camilla. I was paralyzed when I saw her. She no longer wore luxurious silk dresses, nor expensive jewelry, nor that arrogant smile. She wore old clothes, a wrinkled blouse, and a faded grey skirt. Her hair was tangled, and she had deep dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in many nights. She looked haggard, frightened, like a cornered animal. I looked around the room, searching for familiar faces, but I didn't see Rod, or David, or the latter's elegant wife. Camilla was there, completely alone, with no one by her side. Mrs. Carter stood up and presented the case with clarity and relentless logic. She showed the evidence one by one, like arrows directed at the truth. The false contract with the signature expert's analysis, the house buyer's statement about the illegal transaction, the bank statements proving that I had to withdraw all my savings to cover the damages. Every document Mrs. Carter placed on the judge's bench was like a hammer blow to my heart, reminding me of everything we had had to endure. When Camilla's lawyer tried to justify her actions, alleging psychological pressure due to the husband's lack of financial support, Mrs. Carter immediately refuted it. She asked to project the photos from Detective Lucy's report onto the large screen. Camilla, hand in hand with Rod, entering and leaving a luxury apartment, shopping at exclusive stores with a radiant smile. The entire room murmured, and all eyes turned toward Camilla, as if they wanted to burn her. She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling, unable to look up. The part of the trial concerning custody was even faster. Mrs. Carter presented the statement from the lead teacher, who had witnessed Camilla forgetting Davy at school. She also showed testimonies from neighbors, who spoke about the nights Camilla disappeared, leaving the child in my care. But the hardest evidence was the video from the neighborhood security cameras. In it, Davy could be seen huddled under an overhang, clutching his backpack, with the rain running down his little face, and his eyes red with fear and loneliness. I heard murmurs in the room. Some people shook their heads. I squeezed Robert's hand and felt him squeeze back firmly, holding back the pain. Camilla remained seated, her head bowed, not looking at the screen, but I knew she couldn't escape the truth. The judge pounded the gavel, and his firm voice resonated in the silence. Camilla was sentenced to 2 years of probation for fraud and forgery of documents, in addition to a heavy fine that I knew she couldn't pay. As for custody, the court declared that she was not a fit or responsible mother. Davy's guardianship was placed entirely in Robert's charge. Upon hearing the sentence, Camilla collapsed to the floor, sobbing loudly. But in that crying, I perceived no remorse, only the desperation of someone who has lost everything, not for love, but for pursuing empty things. Robert and I left the courthouse in silence, without looking back. Outside, a light drizzle was falling, but I felt light in my soul, as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. Robert took my hand and said softly, "Mum, thank you. If it weren't for you, I don't know how I would have endured all this." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "You are my son. I will do anything for you and for Davy." We walked in the rain without saying more, but we both knew we were looking forward, toward a future without Camilla's shadow. Weeks later, while grocery shopping, I heard some nosy neighbors gossiping about the fate of those who had harmed our family. They said that Mr. Stephen Thompson, upon discovering the truth about Rod, fired him immediately. Not only that, he also made public his lack of ethics within the service sector, exposing his image as a fraud. Without reputation or a job, Rod no longer had anywhere to hide in the city. David's family also suffered the consequences. His business was faltering due to his son's shame, and I learned that they sold their luxurious apartment and quietly moved away to escape the scandal. As for Camilla, after losing everything, she had to look for a job as a waitress in a small hotel on the outskirts, living a life she would have despised before. I heard all this, but inside me there was only calm, neither resentment nor compassion. A month after the trial, one Saturday afternoon, as I was pruning the porch planters, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Mr. Stephen Thompson, with the same kind smile as before. This time he didn't come alone, but was accompanied by a young assistant who carried a folder of documents. "Mrs. Miller, I came to visit the family, and incidentally, I have something I want to discuss with Robert," he said, with a warm but serious voice. I invited him in. I prepared a pot of hot tea, feeling curious. Robert ran out, his face lit up when he saw him. "Uncle Thompson, I didn't imagine I'd see you again so soon," he said enthusiastically, like a child reunited with someone he admires. We sat in the living room. The afternoon light filtered through the window, casting golden glints on the wooden floor. Mr. Thompson didn't beat around the bush. He went straight to the point. "After firing Rod, I reviewed the entire restaurant operation," he said, looking directly at Robert. "I realized that the Blue Terrace is lacking something, a connection with local culture, with the stories and experiences that customers really want to discover. Your experiential tourism project, Robert, is exactly what I was looking for." He pushed a contract across the table and placed it in front of my son. "I want to invest in your project. We will work together. Your company will be the exclusive partner that offers cultural tours for my chain of restaurants. What do you think?" Robert froze, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He took the contract, his hands trembling slightly, and read every clause again and again, fearing that it was all a dream. I, sitting next to him, saw how his eyes welled up, not with sadness, but with the joy and recognition he had longed for so long. That project, the idea of trips to discover local culture, was something he had built with effort in his darkest days, when the whole world seemed to turn its back on him. "Uncle Stephen," Robert looked up, his voice broken. "Thank you, Uncle. I won't disappoint you." He stood up and bowed deeply to Mr. Thompson, with a gesture full of respect and gratitude. At that moment, Davy ran out of his room with a scribbled piece of paper in his hand. He no longer had that shyness or fear from before. He ran toward me, hugged my legs, and showed me his drawing with a radiant smile. "Grandma, I finished. Look how pretty it turned out." I knelt down, took the drawing, and felt my heart stop. In it were 3 people, a white-haired woman, a tall man, and a child. The 3 were holding hands under a bright sun, surrounded by mountains and green fields. "That's you, Daddy, and me," Davy said in his innocent voice. I stroked his head, tears about to flow, but I smiled. "It's beautiful, my love," I said, my voice trembling. That drawing, though simple, was an entire world that I had fought to protect. Mr. Thompson watched the scene with a broader smile. "You have a wonderful family, Robert," he said, as he stood up and patted my son on the shoulder. "Do this project well, not just for me, but for the little guy and for Mrs. Miller too." He left, leaving the contract on the table, and a spark of hope lit in our hearts. Robert sat down, hugged Davy, and I saw a new determination in his eyes, as if he had found his purpose in life again. I went out onto the porch and looked through the window. The first rays of dawn filtered through the frame, bathing the room in a golden hue. The storm had truly passed, leaving a clear sky, not perfect, but full of promises. I thought about the difficult days, about the sleepless nights hugging Robert during his seizures, about the times I wiped Davy's tears when he asked about his mother. All that pain now seemed distant, like a nightmare that dissipates with the arrival of dawn. I turned and saw Robert chatting animatedly with Mr. Thompson's assistant, his voice full of enthusiasm as he talked about the trips, the towns, and the stories he wanted to tell. Davy, by his side, was happily colouring another drawing, humming a children's song. I stood there, watching my small family, feeling a peace I thought was lost forever. We were no longer the perfect family I once dreamed of, but we were together, and that love was stronger than any past wound. From everything I have lived, I understood that life can take many things away from us, but no one can take away the strength and love that resides in a mother's heart. There are wounds that never heal, but they are the ones that teach us to get up, stronger and wiser. I once thought that revenge was the only way to recover justice, but in the end, I understood that true justice is not born of hatred, but of determination and faith in what is right. Evil always ends up destroying itself, while love, compassion, and integrity, even if trampled again and again, are the only things that can save a family. The story you have just heard has changed names and places to protect the identity of those who participated in it. We are not telling it to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own home? I really wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to keep silent to maintain peace? Or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can be a light to guide others on their path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage will lead us toward better days. Right now, on the final screen, I will leave two of the channel's most loved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.